So what is the Neocloud and what does it mean for the communications market? I'm Brian Carney and this is Watch This Space. With me on this episode is Francis O'Flaherty, the Chief Operating Officer of Rivada Networks. Fran, welcome to the show again. Good to have you back on.
Good to be here. Thank you, Brian.
So, Fran, tell us about the Neocloud market. What is Neocloud? How is it different from the cloud service providers that we all know and love, and why should we care?
And from the names that you're very familiar with, I'm sure. So Neocloud is a genuinely new infrastructure category, and it has emerged, I guess, really over the last 24 months, but it's really gaining steam now, and it's attracting a lot of investment dollars, and it's to fill a gap between what the huge hyperscalers are offering and what the market demands in terms of more focused niche products. And they sit in the middle of the hyperscalers on one hand and the colocation giants on the other. And they offer a very distinct set of services. They're typically purpose-built. A lot of the times they are GPU-centric platforms. They have a much narrower scope depending on what services and solutions they're offering. And they're typically faster to deploy. I say they're small and they're new, but the amount of investment they're attracting is really, really sizable. And it indicates a shift in the market away from some of the big hyperscalers to solutions that, in some cases, and this is the bit that's especially interesting to Rivada, a more sovereign solution that is being sought out by the market, given some of the geopolitical tensions that we're seeing globally as countries look to secure data sovereignty and security of the data on their networks and in those territories.
So what I hear you describing is a market that seems to me, I hear GPUs and so on, and I think AI, and I imagine that a lot of this build out is going to AI. But you're also saying there's sovereign use cases for these neoclouds. Is that because sovereigns want to be running, their own AI programs or platforms, or how do the two connect?
Yes, so sovereign is one of the focuses of these, and there's various market sectors that they are targeting and offering services to. Some of them are almost exclusively providing services to the hyperscalers, and they're being funded through large contracts with the typical hyperscalers. Others are built around sustainability, and they are pursuing strategies that minimize energy resources and water resources. There's a bunch that are kind of repurposed Bitcoin mining operations, if you like.
Okay.
There are a number that are platform centric and kind of provide OpenAI and Anthropic and the other AI companies with services exclusively. And then there's this sector that's focused around data resiliency, residency, and sovereignty. And these are generally have a very regional focus. They don't have any dependence or interaction generally with the hyperscalers. And that's to fill this gap in the market that's increasingly taking shape, where you've got sovereign customers looking for these types of service, but don't want to be exposed to some of the requirements and obligations that the hyperscalers are faced with. So, for example, the Cloud Act basically means that the US administration can get access to any data on a network of a US company or hyperscaler that is US headquartered. So that presents challenges for several countries. And we've seen recently a movement in France, Germany, and elsewhere away from large US hyperscalers to either regional or domestic providers. And in some cases, the government's funding their own projects or funding private helping private capital to build in their jurisdiction on the back of large contracts or forward contracts. So from that perspective, we've seen quite a lot of movement in the last 12 months for these sovereign or regional specialists.
Okay, and so talk to me about the communications piece of this. You mentioned that Rivada could play a role, and its Outernet could add value here. So tell me how that would work.
So that's interesting to us because it aligns directly with some of the solutions and services that we're offering. So you'll find that one of the key pitches, if you like, or what they are offering is very similar to what Rivada offers in terms of security on the network and effectively bypassing any terrestrial networks and reducing vulnerabilities on existing transport networks. And what we provide is exactly that capability from a communications perspective. So for the most part, these new hyperscalers will, especially the ones that are focused on sovereign solutions and services, they will go to great lengths to make sure they own all of the infrastructure, both hardware and software, and any platforms that ride on top of them, that they have everything security locked down, right from the real estate to the actual hardware that goes in there, and then the services platform layer that sits on top.
Right.
The one bit that they don't have control over is the communications layer, and that's where we come in. So we've had conversations with a number of these companies over the last couple of months, and what we're offering really resonates with them in terms of providing them that data sovereignty over a network that can't be breached by the traditional vulnerabilities of terrestrial networks and fiber networks. That's the bit that really resonates with them, and that's where the sweet spot is for us and them.
Sure, because if you're trying to sell a product that's totally locked down, but communicating with it means going across the public internet or traveling through jurisdictions that maybe you don't want to, or not knowing whether it's traveling through those jurisdictions, that's obviously a big hole in the security. So,
Yeah.
yeah, talk about that.
Yeah. So international, so these guys typically, as I mentioned, they will go to great lengths to make sure they have full control over the land and power, the hardware and compute, the AI services that run on top of the hardware, and obviously the end customer. The one bit that they don't control, and especially where these guys have multiple sites, which they all do, is the connectivity, and especially if cross-border connectivity is involved. And that's where we come in and offer them that puzzle piece that they currently don't have. So right now, the only options open to them are gateway-dependent backbones or the terrestrial fiber networks, and that story undercuts their sovereignty pitch,
Right.
because that multi-site backhaul is real exposure for them, and defense-grade customers will immediately ask about the connectivity question. So we provide that solution to them, that both accelerates or improves their pitch, if you like, and then closes that loophole.
Yeah, that's super interesting because there is no other way currently to connect any 2 points on the globe without traveling through
Exactly. Yeah.
sort of public internet at some point. And so if you can encrypt stuff, but we've seen recently some people talk about post-quantum problems, but even before we get there, we've seen with the advances in AI models in recent months and weeks that vulnerabilities in encryption and exposures that people didn't know were there are cropping
Hmm.
up, more every day. We had this
Yeah,
Bitcoin wallet attack not that long ago, and we had that Mythos, um, you know, 0 day story from a few months back. So,
yeah,
encryption is no longer
yeah.
doesn't feel as safe as it did even just a few months ago if you're sending stuff over
Yes.
public wires, right? So,
Yeah,
talk a little bit if you can about how the Outernet is kind of an
sure.
air-gapped
Yeah.
network for these guys.
Yeah. So what these guys need and what they're looking for is typically intersite backhaul. It may be domestic, it may be international or multi-jurisdictional. But they want connectivity that doesn't transit foreign-owned gateways or national telecom backbones or subsea cables that are owned by, myriad different owners and operators. Um, they need security partners whose sovereign grade positioning matches their sales pitch. And we provide that with wholesale capacity that they can integrate into their own managed services. So the fact that, what Rivada is offering with our gatewayless mesh, we can connect their sites very securely without routing through any of this infrastructure or without exposing their data to those vulnerabilities. And by the very nature of our offering, it's sovereign grade, it's security focused, and that that brand positioning, if you like, resonates exactly with what these new service providers are offering. And the fact that it's, we can tailor it to them being in control of all of the routing and predetermining the trafficking on that network adds another level of security for them that they just currently can't avail of in the market.
Got it. And Dave Burr, who was on the show recently, he referred to it as a rooftop to rooftop solution. So you're
Exactly.
literally going from your premises to your other premises and, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
literally not touching the ground, right? It doesn't have to go through the local loop. It doesn't have to go to a local gateway. It
Hmm.
doesn't
Hmm.
transit a gateway after it leaves your premises. It just goes from your building to your building
Yeah.
through
Yeah.
space, right? So this is an unmatched capability. Um,
Yeah, and we've one potential. We have one company that reached out recently. We have a couple of conversations with them, um, and their entire pitch is at government customers and focused around the security and sovereignty of the data on their network. They promote the fact that um, the network will never touch the internet. Their solution to date was building dedicated fiber between the 30 odd sites that they have planned, the data centers they've planned for across the country, which is just phenomenally expensive and will take years to achieve. So by availing of and partnering with us, they achieve that from day one without having to incur huge costs or delays by building fiber themselves. Now, maybe they do that anyway as a backup, but they're certainly exploring the possibility of working with us exclusively to provide that connectivity service.
yeah, no, that's a good point because obviously, if a customer is determined enough, and had enough money, they could probably lay their own fiber in a lot of cases, although, subsea runs might be impractical for most use cases. But um, it takes years. You have to, dig up roads in many cases, or dig up rights of way, or hang it on utility poles. And, this is a wireless solution, as it were, that doesn't require any of that construction.
Yeah, yeah. And you're also seeing, and we'll continue to see, governments increasingly treating AI computers as a critical infrastructure or strategic resource in the same way that they do with energy or other utilities. And I think you'll see increased momentum for this sector over the next over the coming years, where governments begin to kind of rein in um, a little bit on, or certainly pay more attention to where their data goes, how it gets transported over communications networks, and they'll tighten up on reducing some of the vulnerabilities that they're currently exposed to. So I think this market is set for growth. There's some very interesting players. It's very well capitalized, as I mentioned. And it's not all focused on the sovereign play. There are other market sectors that they're focusing on attracting customers to. But for us, there's a very clear strategic fit, if you like, between the gateway-less network that we offer and the requirements of these sovereign cloud or sovereign AI companies.
That's really fascinating, friend. Listen, thanks for coming on. Sounds like it's a really interesting market, and that it's growing fast, and that the Outernet is kind of a match made in heaven, so to speak, for the sovereign cloud players and the sovereign Neocloud players. Appreciate your time, and thanks for talking with me today.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure as always.
This has been Watch This Space. I'm Brian Carney with Rivada Networks. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you again soon. Bye now.